Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sasquatch Theory. In this video we have Bill, and he had a Bigfoot encounter in Coldiron, Kentucky in the Appalachian Mountains. Bill was turkey hunting at Pine Mountain when he had a bird come into range. When he fired a shot, a creature took off after his turkey, and he is for sure it was not a bear, a coyote, or any known animal in the area. He knows without a doubt this was a Sasquatch. Bill seems to be a very credible eyewitness, and he was very genuine about what he experienced that day on the mountain. Sasquatch exist, and they live out there in the forest. Just because you have never seen one before, it does not mean that they have not seen you. I think they are always watching hunters, and they will possibly wait for us to shoot an animal so they can come in and take the kill. They are certainly opportunistic creatures, and they will gladly go after an easy meal if the opportunity presents itself. I think wild turkey is one of their favorite meals, and they will break cover and risk being seen in order to get one of these birds. Wild turkey have excellent eyesight, and they can easily be spooked, so it's hard to get a meal like this. If a hunter gets in the way of that, they will become a little territorial to make sure they come out on top. I remember Kerry Arnold had a Bigfoot encounter when he was turkey hunting in Mississippi, and the Sasquatch was very aggressive towards Kerry as it was in pursuit of a flock of turkeys. The creature stood in the open and shook a pine tree back and forth to show its aggression towards Kerry. I have also interviewed a turkey hunter from Tennessee when I first started the channel, and it was a very similar encounter. The Sasquatch broke cover, came towards the turkey decoys, realized the hunter was sitting there, and it backpedaled back into the woods. If you enjoy Sasquatch Theory, please follow the channel if possible, and if you have a Bigfoot encounter that you would like to share with me, please contact me at sasquatchtheory@outlook.com. All right, Bill, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you so much for asking. Bill, if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of where you're from, and your Bigfoot encounter from the very beginning, please.
Well, I'm 57 years old. I'm an engineer for a environmental cascade chamber facility. We do testing for Tesla. I'm their primary engineer. I've been on my second marriage of 15 plus years to my wonderful wife, 2 daughters, and I hunted from I got into turkey hunting because I just loved. My dad taught me kind of to hunt with them, and we had them for dinner, and they were delicious, so much better than a butterball from the grocery store. So I just got into turkey hunting in the early 90s. The location where I hunted, my dad had 56 acres in southeastern Kentucky, Coldiron, Kentucky to be exact, off Pine Mountain, and the Appalachians, very high, remote area. Some of the elevations were, over 2,000 feet. I would hunt. Once I learned how to hunt the turkeys, and you had to call them in and learn the technique, and it took me a while to get good at it, but then I got good. And I would go out and make a day of it, and just love to be out in nature. It was after my first marriage, and I was kind of needed a new hobby. And although I lived in Michigan, I wanted to go down to my dad's. I'd go down there as much as I can. Most of the time I would go would be September, October, and just to see him. And he was older, so he couldn't go with me because hiking those mountains, it would take, at times it would take me 2.5 hours to get up there to up to the higher elevations. No one was really ever up there. All the years I hunted up there, I didn't ever ran into anyone. It was very remote. You can't get up there with a all-terrain vehicle. The only way is by foot. Very steep at times. You had to crawl to get up certain spots, and there were spots where it was It was open and there were clearings and it was a little bit flatter, but most of it was, you're on the side of a mountain. And so the main encounter I had, I think I'm just going to go right to the encounter and the visual. And the worst part for me, I mean, after this happened, I haven't been back in the woods. This
Okay.
happened.
If you can, just kind of describe what you were doing that day and put me in your shoes and describe everything with as much detail as possible.
Well, on the day of the encounter, I left in the morning. It was about a 2-hour hike up to where I was going. And I had a blind set up there. It was probably elevation. I'm guessing I was 1,500 feet up, maybe even 2,000 feet, probably 3/4 of the way up the mountain. Again, very steep in certain spots where you would have to crawl. It took me about 2 hours to get there. Um, so I set up my blind. I finally got there, and I was fully camouflaged, and I started my calls. And there would be 15-minute. Normally, it's about 15 minutes. So you would call, wait 15 minutes. If the hen would react, she would call back, and then you would mimic her call. If it was loud, you would, it's just a squawk box. And if she was quiet, you would imitate her calls. And so there was an art to calling them in. And this whole process was probably about 2 hours before I finally had visual on them. They're very slow and methodical. They're just running the ground, working the ground, slowly running, walking up. There was about 6 of them or 7. I believe the hen was in front. When they finally got close enough, my heart's kind of, and then now I sent you a picture of the picture I sent you was actually the year before. And also the picture I sent you of the property, that was the actual mountain you can see in the picture. So they finally got close enough, and I kind of was a little bit eager. I should have waited a little bit longer. I made a movement and they spotted me. Turkeys actually have pretty good eyesight. They're always watching for predators. I stood up, I locked in on one, I shot, and they all scattered. Now, when they scatter, their initial reaction is to get off the ground from predators, coyotes, bobcats, whatever. And one off to my far right, probably about 30 yards, I always carried my shotgun, 20 gauge, and then my rifle. It jumped up it was actually an easy shot. It jumped up, they all scattered. 3 or 4 of them just glided and jumped and glided, and they scattered down, and they can fly. They can't really fly up, but they can glide. People are not aware of that. And I shot this bird. It fell down. And in the past, I've had where sometimes when you shoot them, they just lay there. Other times they'll roll if it's steep enough and there's nothing to stop it. No trees, no logs, no shrubs. And if it's open and steep enough, they'll roll downhill. And this one particularly, when I shot it, it hit the ground, it rolled, and I'm watching it roll off to my right about 30 yards. And I'm thinking, great, here we go. Because I've had time in prior years where I never found them. They'll roll 100 yards, and you can see where they're rolling, and the weeds or the leaves are, you can tell where they went to a point. It's like embedded and this one started bouncing and rolling. So I'm focusing on that, and off to my right, slightly more elevated, about 30 or 40 yards to my right, I catch an image that I almost had a heart attack. Now, I've been hunting 15 years, and then when I was younger, I hunted a little bit in northern Michigan with my father. And what I saw was, my first reaction was I saw a primate. I saw something on 2 legs. It immediately came out of like a slightly heavy brushed area with some pine trees, probably about 40 yards, a little bit more uphill on my back, off my back right shoulder. And it came out of there like my first reaction was, I spooked a big whitetail. There's deer, there's black bears. I've seen black bears. There's fox, coyotes, owls, a lot of snakes too. By the way, that was my only fear of being up there, was the rattlesnakes and the copperheads. This thing came out of the brush off my far right side. It was on two legs, and it was moving so fast, and it wasn't running, Miguel. It was, the best way I can describe it, it was galloping. It was on two legs, and it was slightly hunched over, and immediately the thing that it was a clear day, slightly breezy, and its arms were so long. Its arms were literally down to its knees. And it galloped, and I watched this thing. It was so fast and so graceful and almost effortless. And at this point, I watched it probably about 30 yards, a couple gallops. Like, it wasn't running. It was like galloping. It was like hopping, galloping, if that makes any sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And the third gallop, I'm locked in on this. Okay, I'm 37 years old. I have perfect vision. It's a clear day. There's nothing in front of me. It's probably about 40 yards off to my right, and it's working its way down this ridge. And on the third gallop, it used its left arm to just catapult almost off this fallen tree and like jump hopped over this tree, and it landed 40 feet down the ridge. It was so fast. This thing covered, from the entire visual, this thing covered, I want to guess, 75 to 100 yards before I lost it. The last hop, run, and it seemed like it always used its left arm. Maybe it was the angle of the mountain, the ridge it was running down. It was strictly running downhill, not extremely steep, but for me, I would have to carefully walk it. This thing, I knew in my mind halfway through this, I was in shock, but I knew this was some type of a primate. Now, before this happened, I had no beliefs, no thoughts. There was never in my mind. The only thing I was worried about being in the woods was the snakes. Black bears, I've seen them. They're very timid. I've never had an aggressive encounter with the black bears. Never saw brown bears. Through this run, it went through a little bit of a heavy bushy area with some pines, and then I cleared through that, and it ran about two more gallops, or hops, or galloped, whatever you want to call it. And at this point, it's 80 yards down. I'm strictly looking at its back. Its head's tilted down, and there was like a ridge with there was a lot of fallen trees. The third and the final hop gallop, it just effortlessly jumped over this with its left arm again, and went over the ridge to a lower, steeper area, and it was gone. Now, where the turkey had fallen, it also was roughly in the same direction. Obviously, I stopped looking at where the bird was falling and rolling after seeing this giant primate in the woods that almost gave me a heart attack. So from there, I'm about to have a heart attack. I've been in the woods enough. I've walked up on whitetails, big bucks. I'm not a deer hunter. I've deer hunted a little bit, but I'm not a deer hunter. I don't like the taste of it. I only hunt what I like to eat, and turkeys are my favorite. And that's what occasionally some pheasant and grouse, which are wild, uh, another type of wild bird. But it was 90% of the hunting I did was I'd grab some squirrels for my dad. He liked to eat them. To me, they're disgusting, but I would shoot squirrels for my dad a little bit. If he wanted some, he'd make stew out of them. But anyway, that's all I hunted for was turkeys, and I learned how to hunt them. And after I lost the visual of this, it never the word Bigfoot never. I didn't believe in it. I never saw it. I didn't think about it. It never even entered my mind. To me, it was like a unicorn or a Loch Ness monster. We would have, we would have footage. We would have. So that was when I became the most frightened. And I thought I'm out there by myself. I'm probably about 2 miles away. I'm 2,000 feet up on the side of Pine Mountain. And that's when it all clicked. I stood there and I realized I got to get out of here. I have to go. I cannot be here. I am terrified. I was terrified. My heart was pounding so hard. I was so terrified. I left my backpack, and then I think I had a water bottle there and half a sandwich. I'd go out and hunt all day. I left it there. I had my shotgun and my rifle. I strapped my shotgun on my back, tightened it on with my strap, and I headed the other way. Now, the way that where this primate ran, I mean, I had a clear visual of this thing, Miguel, and I've seen everything. I've spent a lot of time in the woods. I mean, this was part of me. My mind was saying, did someone raise a chimp and raised it, and then they set it off? And the Bigfoot thing still never really. The word after watching this, it was so much to consume. I was numb. I was just trying to breathe. I couldn't. What I clearly saw, and I know what I saw. I was numb. I didn't know if I was breathing. I don't know if I peed myself. I was terrified after I lost sight of it. My reaction was, I have to get out of here. Now I had 2 guns with me. I had my shotgun and my rifle. I always took 2 guns. That was just the rifle for long distance, my shotgun for close for a 20 gauge buckshot. That hour and a half walk back was the most terrifying hour and a half of my life. Now it was still daylight. It was probably 6 o'clock. It was forever. After a while, I stopped looking back because then I started thinking about this. I obviously have made it back to my dad's house. It was probably an hour and a half. It's a lot easier to. I don't know how long it took me. It seemed like an eternity because I came to the realization. And by the way, I had 3 days left. The next morning, I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I went home. I still had 3 days. My dad said, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "Dad, I have to go." I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be on the property, more or less back on that mountain. I did not want to be there. And I have not hunted since. I love my backpack. I was terrified. I was running. I fell a few times. Lucky I didn't tumble down the mountain. I was lucky. I always make markers because I've gotten lost up there before. If you go the wrong way, you can go down the wrong side, down the wrong ridge. I mean, there's nobody up there. It's very remote. In all the years of hunting, I never came across another hunter, ever. There's no one up there when you go up high enough. And I've ran across a few down that, work with streams and, but up at the higher elevations, which is very hard to get to, I never ran across anyone. And at the time I was in my 30s, I could do it. I was in good shape. So I'm sorry if I'm rambling. This whole thing is I've kept this to myself. This happened in September, October of 2004. I was 37 years old when it happened. And now looking back, after this all happened, I started watching YouTube stuff. I started watching the Patterson Gimlin film. Started watching YouTube clips. And there's one particular clip, I can see if I can find you the link. It was a Russian. It, it's probably about a 10-second clip. And this thing moved exactly like how I saw it. It was galloping. It was using its extremely, and it was so muscular in the back, the rib cage, the legs. It was exactly like that. It moved exactly like that. And once I saw that clip, which was years later, that's when I confirmed to myself, okay, these things are real. In all the years prior, I ran across one in particular, a tree formation. And when the trees fall there, based on the root structure and the steepness, it's very steep at certain parts. There's other parts where there's openings and it's somewhat flatter, but still at a pitch, at an angle. The trees generally fall downhill based on the root structure. They never fall backwards. They'll fall occasionally partially sideways. They always fall down, never backwards uphill. So this was several years before my encounter, and I'm walking up on this tree structure. And again, it was up at a higher elevation. And I saw these 7 trees. There were maples, some hickories. Some of them were 6 inches wide, 20, 30 feet high. And all these trees were intertwined like a teepee. And 3 of them were bent backwards. They were broken 4 or 5 feet, not from the ground, 4, 5, 6, 8 feet up, and pushed and broken backwards. And that was before I just looked at this and I'm like, who is up here screwing around? Again, the whole time, all the other little encounters, I had a couple wood knocks. I really never had any vocalizations. I had a couple, never any whoops, but I wasn't listening for it. I wasn't thinking about a primate, you know? And so after the encounter, and watching this thing covered 100, I don't know, 75 or 100 yards, a pretty steep terrain, down a ridge, over a log, gone. I want to say the entire visual was 5 or 6 seconds. This thing covered, which would have taken me 5 or 10 minutes, very carefully. At points, maybe getting on all fours, scooching down. No way I could walk it. This thing just gracefully, just it wasn't running. It was like galloping, and it would use its arms occasionally on every second or third gallop to just down the mountain with no effort at all. And the sound was minimal. And again, when I came after it was gone and I lost visual of it, I didn't even care about the turkey. I didn't care about my backpack. I didn't care about nothing. I wanted out of there. And looking back now, I believe that thing, that Bigfoot, that it was there, because when it first appeared, it's not like I heard something way up the ridge or coming up from behind me or off to the side. It appeared instantly out of this like thicket, a few pine trees, a big stump. I don't know if you're familiar with the Appalachian Mountains in southeastern Kentucky, but there's areas where there's some openings. There's areas where it's thick, and I always pick my turkey locations in an opening, so I could have a clear shot. Just like this thing came out of that thicket like it was there the whole time. And to this day, I believe The entire from the time I got there and set up my blind and started my calls was an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I am 100% certain it was there the whole time, and I believe it knew exactly what I was doing. It and I'm always whenever I hunt, I'm always visually looking, looking for owls. There's a lot of owls down, just constantly just observing nature, looking behind me to both sides. I looked at that probably 30 times over 2 hours, and I never heard anything. I believe it was there with me the whole time. I believe it knew what I was doing. And the minute that bird hit the ground and started rolling, it's dinner time. It's going to get my bird. And I believe in my heart that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, that is very interesting. So you think the Sasquatch was chasing after the turkey?
I don't think I know it was. I mean, it ran in the exact direction where it was. And again, I've shot them where, luckily, if they run up on some thicket, or they bounce up on a log, or if it's flat enough, but on the steeper elevations, they will roll. I've had a couple years prior where I never found them. Or I went back the next day and I found some feathers and some blood, and who knows what got it, bear, fox, coyote, I don't know. I didn't bother to go looking for it. I thoroughly believe it was after that bird. I mean, it was not running, but galloping and down the ridge in the same location where that bird rolled.
Yeah. I've heard grizzly bear hunters say that, or just people that are in grizzly bear territory, that whenever they kill like an elk or something, the bear will hear the gunshot and chase after that animal. Like they know exactly where you're at and where to look for the food. And I wonder if Sasquatch do the same thing.
I believe it. Again, I've had a long time to think about this. I believe it knew exactly what I was doing. And another thing is, again, this whole visual, I had a perfect clear look at this. This thing was 40, 50 yards. As it got farther down the ridge, okay, it got further, but the whole time, two things: I never thought to raise my gun or try to get a picture. I was just completely numb. I was just trying to absorb what I was witnessing. The last thing I would have thought was to pull my gun on it, and I wouldn't have anyway. But I didn't even think about doing it. I didn't think about trying to get a picture. I didn't think, because I was so just I was numb about the whole thing. It was so overwhelming what I was witnessing. And secondly, when it was working its way down, it was so fast. I mean, I've seen deer in full, and this thing, to me, could outrun a full grown whitetail buck. I've walked up on bucks, and this thing was as faster across some pretty tough terrain that I could barely walk very carefully. It never looked at me. It never turned its head. Its head was always like tilted down, hunched over somewhat, and its arms were always like by its knees or a foot off the ground, almost like a chimp would act in a weird way. It was like a primate. It never looked at me, but yet it knew I was there. The gunshot didn't scare it. It reacted on it. And, looking back, at first it took me to put all the pieces together. Even to this day, I'm still like, it was intelligent. It knew what I was doing. It was patient. It was right there off to my right, 30 or 40 yards in some thicket. Never heard anything out of it. It was a perfectly clear day, slight breeze. silent. You're up on the, 2,000 feet on the side of a mountain in the Appalachians. It was actually on Pine Mountain. I believe this thing was there the whole time, and it knew exactly it was just going to wait. It knew I was calling these birds, and as soon as one hit the ground and started rolling, it went after it.
Yeah, it sounds like it did. What did this creature look like?
Well, after the encounter, after the visual, I started watching stuff, and the best way I can describe it, it was very similar. The color was very similar to the Patterson Gimlin film. It was like a rich brown, like a darkish brown. There was no black, there was no red on this. Under its left arm, I did see like a lighter. It was almost, I don't know if it was a scar on its left rib cage, because the entire visual was it's on my right. It's running downhill. So I'm looking at the left side of this, right? I never saw the clear front of it. After it got so far down near the end, at the last 70 to 100 yards, it was strictly looking like the back of it. It was very similar to the Patterson Gimlin film as far as the color, the hair. It had somewhat of a pointed head, no neck, very wide shoulders, and its arms were massive and long. And it's muscular. I could see I could see its leg, the muscular, in its legs. I mean, there was no doubt this was anything else. This was not a bear. It was not a deer. It wasn't a man in a suit. It resembled, but it wasn't. It wasn't. It was more lanky and more, maybe a little thinner at the at like the waistline and the hip area. It seemed more very fit, but thinner than the Patterson, than the Patty video.
Okay. And after the Sasquatch took off and it was galloping, did it ever follow you out of the woods, or did you ever hear it again?
Well, that Miguel was the most terrified. The first 20 minutes, and then I would look back, and then I would go, and then I would stop, and I was shaking. I'm surprised I didn't have a heart attack on the side of that mountain. I've never been so scared. I've walked up on a few rattlers here and there, and it was nothing. A scale of 1 to 10, the rattlers were a 1. This was an 11 out of a 10. I was scared for my life, because this thing was so fast and quiet and camouflaged. So after a while, about halfway down, I gave up looking, because I realized it could be right there and I'm not even going to see it. I mean, it could have just been. After a while, I stopped looking back. After probably 20 minutes, I just was trying not to fall. It was steep. I'm zigzagging down. I stopped looking back at that point. I just wanted to get back to my dad's house. I think the entire was probably an hour. I had to stop at a few points. I didn't have water. I left my backpack there. I was getting, it was quite a workout. And at this time, I'm 37 years old. So after a while, I stopped looking back, because I thought to myself, what's going to matter anyway? This thing is so camouflaged. It's so fast. If it wanted to take me, it could have. It could have easily. But I don't think it was aggressive. It didn't. I think it was curious. I think somehow it knew that, I wasn't an animal. I was I don't know. I'm sorry if I'm mumbling on this.
Oh, no, you're fine. Did you ever return to the area to look for some evidence or see if more activity would take place?
No, The only way I would go back there would be with 3 or 4 skilled hunters with high-powered rifles. That would be, and daytime only. I would never go back up to that mountain in that location. Never again. And I haven't been back since.
Yeah, I don't blame you. Did you ever get the feeling that there were more creatures around other than the one you encountered?
I don't know. That I can't really clearly answer. Possibly, being how well this one was. I mean, again, when it appeared, it was there. It's not like it came running off in a distance. It was right there with me the whole time. And then it just shot out, and there it was, and going so fast. So there could have been 2 or 3 more there. Very possibly. Were they there? I don't know. They could have been. If I had to guess, yes.
Yeah, I would think so. And do you think that Squatch ever found the turkey?
Oh, I have no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
I have no doubt. I mean, in prior years, I had a couple roll where it was getting late. I would use red duct tape to go back the next day. Then more than one occasion, I would go back and I would find a few feathers and blood, but the bird's gone. Now it could have been a bear, could have been a fox, coyote, or it could have been a primate. It could have been a Bigfoot. I don't know, but now again, that sat overnight and went back. What took it? I don't know. But I have no doubt in my mind that bird that I shot that bounced and rolled over that ridge, and then what I saw gallop down the mountain in 6 seconds, 100 yards across tough terrain in that same direction, took that turkey. I have no doubt in my mind.
Yeah. And what do you think these creatures are?
I think they're primates. I think they've been here all along. And I can't believe I'm saying this because my entire life, up till I was 37, they don't exist. This is just nonsense. Why isn't there a body? But after my experience, I have no doubts. I have no doubts. I know exactly what I saw, and there was no mistaking what it was. I think they're primates. I think they've been here all along. I see some here, the Pacific Northwest, but you don't realize in the Appalachians, they're there. And there's many areas, again, I've gotten lost up there. If you don't mark where you're going, you can go for miles and miles. There's no way to get up there. You can't get up there with you can't get up there with anything. You have to walk it. You have to crawl it. It's very difficult. It's a bitch to get up there, man. It takes hours. But I loved it because I knew no one else was up there, and I knew that's where the birds were. They felt safe up there, and I learned how to call them. So that's why I always went up there. And I had, from the early '90s, I ran across times. I had now as far as the vocalizations, I never really heard any whoops, but I wasn't listening for them. But I did hear. I can't even explain what the sound was like. It was almost like a squawk, like a squawk, squawk, something weird like that. Like, I've heard owls make weird sounds. I've heard other animals, but these occasional vocalizations, a few times over the years, I would hear it. I'm like, what is that? I didn't know. Like, is that an owl? Is that a bear somehow grunting? What? I didn't know what it was. I did have one particular, but no whoops. The tree knocks, looking back, were there. I mean, there would be a few years in between, but there was never 3 or 4. There would be just an occasional, clear as can be, maybe 100 yards up the ridge or off to the side. I would hear just as loud and clear as can be, a wood knock. Never would be 2 or 3. It would just be one. Um, and then a couple years later, similar, in between turkey calls, I'd hear another one. Always, 100 yards away, pretty close. And I thought to myself, well, it's a tree cracking. That's a big branch falling that fell on that, never dawned on me it was a primate knocking on a tree, but that's what it was.
Yeah. And what else have you experienced out there? Anything else you can think of?
No, no, again, it was Miguel. It was just, again, a 5, 6 second visual encounter. Um, Nothing. I mean, I ran across some bones, a few tree structures, um, but nothing compared to what happened when I saw this. I saw this. If I had to guess, this was a female because it was. It seemed like there was some on his chest. There was some type of like a lump or a small breast. It seemed about. It was large. It was big. I want to say 7 feet, bigger than anything I've ever seen in the woods. And I've ran across, big whitetail bucks. Some of the black bears get 200 pounds, but this was no comparison. Um, so other than that 6 second, 5, 6 seconds, no, I mean that was just the visual. But it was on a clear day. I know I saw it very clearly. Now I don't know again if I mentioned this on its left rib cage. It looked like there was some type of a scar where the hair was thinner, to where I could almost see its skin. It almost looked like a scar. Um, its back was fully fur coated. Its legs were the muscles. Everything was visual. It didn't really have a neck. And its head, the entire run was down, and it never once looked at me. It never turned its head to the left. It was constantly focused down and forward, almost to where its head was on a 90-degree angle and hunched, but yet running on or hopping or galloping on 2 legs and using its arms occasionally to gallop. I'm sorry if I'm rumbling. This happened and 20 years ago. I haven't told any of my friends. I thought about this for months before calling you. I haven't shared this with my wife. I haven't shared this with anyone. It's so absurd, right? I mean, I just decided, and then I started watching your stuff, and I thought, okay, and it took me a long time to bring myself to reach out to you. It did, the months of thinking about this, and I just decided, I have to share this with him. I have to.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you decided to reach out to me, and I understand how hard it is keeping all this inside. And, it can be tough knowing that you encountered something like this and you can't talk to anyone about it. So,
Yeah, I mean, it sounds crazy, right? I mean,
no, not to me. I completely understand. I've had a handful of encounters and a lot of experiences, so I believe you 110%. And why haven't you told your wife? Do you think she'll think you're crazy or something?
yeah. I mean, this happened before I met her. We've been together 15 years now. Um, may I someday? I mean, I just decided not to go there. I mean, me and my wife, we've been together forever. We've never had an argument. She's the best thing ever happened to me. I just decided maybe someday I will. I just don't feel it's time. Maybe opening it up to you now, maybe I can share with her. Um, Again, with coworkers and friends. I did have this is kind of on the off subject, but I did have a I saw something in the sky that to this day, this happened about 2 or 3 years ago in Southern Ohio. We had an Airbnb and I saw something in the sky that just made no sense to me at all. And I did tell her about that, and she was understanding about it. But as far as this encounter, clearly knowing exactly what happened, exactly what it was, I just can't bring myself to tell her yet, and I don't know. And my dad. On another note, my dad hunted. My dad taught me how to hunt. He taught me how to call the turkeys. He taught me. And every now and then he would say, watch out. He would rephrase them, but he never said Bigfoot. He'd always say occasionally, watch out for those big wild dogs up there running around. And then a few other times he'd say, watch out for those wood boogers. I didn't know what he was talking about. He never said, what's the big wild dogs? What's a wood booger? But my dad never came to me and said, son, I saw a primate. He never did. So I brought it to myself never to share it with him. It was just a thing that I just did, an avenue I didn't want to go down with him or my wife. So I've kept it to myself, and it's the whole thing. I mean, it's like it happened yesterday, but that 6-second visual that I had, I know exactly what I saw. And especially again, there's one particular YouTube video. It's in Russia, and then there's another one of. It looked like it was on a logging site. It's construction driving some type of an AV, or someone driving an ATV, and you can see this thing out of a tree, gallop, use its arms, and it covered 30 yards in 2 seconds, and it was gone. And that's exactly what I saw. And if I can find those, I've seen them both before. I'll dig for them if you want to see the clips. Again, when this happened, I never even thought to raise my gun or take a picture. I was so overwhelmed. I was just numb. The last thing I was going to do was pull my gun up on this or try to get a picture. So I understand how there's never been a clear, unless someone's super experienced, and I wish you luck. I hope with time and experience, I didn't have experience in this. I had a bad experience, Miguel. It scared the shit out of me, man. I haven't been back in the woods since. And I'm not going back. Like I said, the only way I would go back would be with 3 or 4 experienced gunsmen and hunters in daylight only with high powered rifles. That's the only way. Because I firmly believe this thing could have taken me. If it would have been an aggressive male and bigger, it could have taken me, and there's nothing I could have done with it about it. It could have taken me, no problem. It was so fast and elusive and just camouflaged. Again, now the whole thing that gets me the most is that it was there the whole time, that hour and a half or 2 hours where I started my calls, I set up my blind. It was there. This thing didn't, once I fired the shot and it reacted way far away. That's not the case. This was there with me the whole time. And I didn't even know it was there. And it was 30 yards to my right, 40 yards right there watching me the whole time. And that's the most scary part about it all. If it would have decided to turn on me, there would have been none it could have probably snuck right up behind me, and that'd be it for me. I was done. Didn't matter if I had guns.
Yeah, that's the spookiest part, knowing how close they can get to you and how long they've been watching you, and you just never had a clue that they were there. So this encounter happened, you mentioned, on Pine Mountain, is that correct? I take it there's a lot of pine trees there?
Yes. Yeah, a lot of hickory, a lot of maples, pine trees. Again, the elevation was very difficult to get up. I mean, again, I was in my 30s, so it would take 2 hours, 2.5 to get up high enough to where, if you want to be lazy about it, you could try to call them. But the birds they were smart. They knew they were, they never, very rarely you would have them down low down by the rivers. There was rivers down in the lower areas. There was actually a river that ran probably a quarter mile from my dad's property. So yeah, I don't know the exact elevations. It was on Pine Mountain. The exact location I can tell you was Coldiron, Kentucky, which is again in this very southeastern corner of Kentucky, about 10 miles from the Tennessee state line and maybe 15 miles east of the Virginia state line. Very remote location in the Appalachians, on Pine Mountain. And I know they're at least 2,000, 2,200, maybe 2,500 feet at point. I mean, they're not hills; these are mountains. They're very steep.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds extremely remote. And the Appalachian Mountains, that's a huge mountain range. I mean, it goes through a lot of states. And
Yeah, I mean,
there's been a lot of
I,
Bigfoot reports there in the past.
well, I had one, and honestly, it was a bad experience. Um, I if I had to do it all over, I wish I would have saw this. It never tried to harm me. I believe this was a female, 400 pounds, 7 feet tall, maybe might have been 7.5, 6.5. Still bigger than any big buck I've seen. Way bigger than any black bear I saw. I can imagine aggressive male. I mean, I would have been done for. And just that thought, knowing that it was there with me the whole time, and how intelligent it was. It knew I was calling in these birds, and I think it had a plan the whole along. Like, I believe, hey, turkey's probably one of its. I believe they're vegetarians and they eat, deer. It would surprise me they take down a black bear, no problem. After what I saw, they can run down anything. I mean, so I think their diet is wide. I mean, even down at the lower spots in the rivers, there's trout, there's fishing down there. So their food supply in that location it's a perfect setup for them. You know?
Yeah, so it was pretty close to the river.
No, 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 no.
No.
This happened. All the rivers were, down in the lower valley areas. This was 2/3, 3/4 up Pine Mountain at an elevation of 1,500 feet, 2,000 feet.
Hmm. But how many
Where I had my
miles away
encounter.
from the river?
Oh yeah, a couple miles at least. Yeah.
Okay, that's not too far away for a Sasquatch, though, so it's relatively close to the river.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm not going to give you any advice as far as sharing it with your wife. That'd be up to you. I'd hate to say you should share that with her and things go south, so I'll leave that up to you. But I think it'd be good to, like, ease your way into it, ask her if she believes, things like that, and just take baby steps towards it.
Yeah, well, she sees me watching, some of your stuff, and she just kind of shrugs her head, so that's part of it. I just don't know if I want to go down that. I don't know if I want to go down that path with her. Some things are better left unsaid. I may someday. I mean, it took a lot for me to reach out to you and share what happened. Um, but I know these things are the king of the woods, man. There's no doubt about it. There's no mountain lion. There's nothing that can, after what I saw, the 6 seconds of how fast and graceful and mobile and athletic and muscular this was. Nothing has a chance against this. If it wanted to turn on you, you're done. I don't care how many guns you got. It'd sneak right up on you. You wouldn't know it. You know.
Yeah.
So, and again, that happened in 2004, and I haven't been set foot in the woods since. So, and I'm older now. I'm into my upper 50s, and I had my share of hunting. I had enough turkeys. I've had my birds, and I'm good with it. And this is something that I'll carry with me the rest of my life. And maybe someday, my dad's 96. God bless him. He's still with us. And I think every day, maybe I should, what did he mean by wood booger? What did he mean by those big wild dogs? Maybe, I go down twice a year to see him. I still go down and see him, but I don't set foot in the woods. I just go visit him and we'll go into, you know, I mean, I've even sat on his front porch. He's in a remote spot. He's got nobody around. I've heard wood knocks just sitting on his porch occasionally. And I thought, well, it's some type of a tree break or something like that. But now when I hear them, I know what they are. They're there. I get it. If you can get up there, and there's caves there, it's wooded. I mean, the rock formations. I know for a fact on his property alone, he's got 3 caves. I never went in them. I didn't want to. That's not where my turkeys are at. That's not what I'm hunting for. But there's caves there. I mean, I could point you in the exact location if you can get up there, and it's hard to get up there, but they're there. I know for a fact.
Well, Bill, I appreciate you for contacting me and being open about what you experienced that day on Pine Mountain. And I know it took a lot for you to share that, but it does mean a lot to me, and it does help out the channel. And, you know, it's good for other people to know that they're out there, and I'm sure a lot of others have had experiences in that same area.
I'm sure. I have no doubts. So thank you again for everything you do, and I wish you luck. I'll continue to watch your channel and stay at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep your head up. And if you ever encounter or experience anything else, feel free to reach back out to me.
I will. Thank you, Miguel. Thank you.
Yep. You take care, Bill, and we'll talk soon, my friend.
Yep. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, Bill, thank you once again for sharing your Bigfoot encounter from Kentucky, and I am sure this changed your view on life forever, and I know it's something that you think about quite often, so I appreciate you for contacting me and sharing it openly with everyone here on Sasquatch Theory. That's terrifying, knowing the Sasquatch will pursue the turkey, even if they know a hunter's around and they could get shot. I mean, they know that a hunter's sitting there with a rifle, and they're still willing to break cover and chase after these gobblers. When I go out in the woods turkey hunting, I always feel like I'm being watched. There's just this ominous feeling that you're not alone out there. Makes me wonder sometimes because I can hear the turkeys gobbling and they don't want to come in. It's almost like they know someone's there. Maybe they know the Sasquatch are around and they're not willing to get any closer. If you guys can, follow me on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and any platform that you find out there. Thank you everyone for watching. Take care and be safe out there in the forest. God bless everyone.